here in southwestern Ontario, when we look out the window, when we go to the country, all we see is farmland. However, go anywhere else in the province and agriculture is not possible. I think it's incredibly important that a province and a country at least be able to, in part, feed itself. And we believe strongly that Ontario has the capacity to feed itself and to even feed others. But when we continually hack away at farmland and turn it into something that cannot produce food, we're in peril.
Yeah, and so given that, what was your initial reaction last Friday, late afternoon, when the announcement came out that the government was going to backtrack on its promise to not open the Greenbelt for development? And I'm going to preface that by saying I literally was at the Royal Winter Fair at an event hosted by the University of Guelph, talking about the importance that food and farming plays to Ontario's economy, literally as I found out when this announcement was being made. And I'm just curious what your reaction was.
Well, to say that I was appalled would be an understatement. I'll start off by saying, I think in this day and age, we really want to trust in someone. And our premier and our government made a promise to keep that Greenbelt intact. And they broke that promise or are in the process of breaking it. And I believe that's wrong. They promised to protect farmland, and now they're doing the opposite. And I think that requires a strong reaction, not only from farmers, but from the people of Ontario who appreciate the fact that we grow food here. And I'll say more about food in Ontario. This is a special place. The crops, the fruits and vegetables that we can grow here in Southern Ontario are special and important. We are the number 3 place in North America for growing specialty crops, especially fruits and vegetables, after California and Florida. And that's something that you don't want to mess with.
And I'm curious, just as a farmer, what's your experience growing here? Because I think one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is, especially as we enter into a time when we're seeing significant impacts from the climate crisis, of just how special Ontario is in terms of how we're bordered by the Great Lakes, the quality of the soil we have here. Can you just maybe talk a little bit about the unique nature of farming in Ontario compared to almost anywhere else in the world, really?
Well, I said we were special, and you're correct. We're actually unique. We are tempered by 3 Great Lakes on 3 sides of the southern part of Ontario here, at least. That gives us an enormous advantage, especially during a time of climate change when most places are getting drier. And although we do experience the odd time when there's not enough rain, for the most part, we're a very temperate place. And that's becoming increasingly unique in North America, in that the places that produce food, like the great American Corn Belt and the central valleys of California, are experiencing 1 in 1,000-year droughts, and we're not. And I think that indicates that we really need to take care of the land that we have, because it will probably become more and more important, not only in an Ontario context, but in a North American context in terms of producing food.
And so given that, the fact that we're losing 319 acres of farmland every day in Ontario due to development, which, to put that into perspective for people, is kind of like losing an area the size of the city of Toronto every year. What does this decision about opening the Greenbelt for development, how is that going to impact the rate of farmland loss we're seeing in the province?
Well, I think it will certainly increase it. The takeouts of the Greenbelt and so on are only part of it. I think what may be even more important to agriculture is the fact that good planning in Ontario has been, for the most part, eliminated, especially at the upper tier level. Good planning, and by good planning, I mean planning that's done right, has the ability to not only provide a wonderful place to live, it also has the ability to save farmland. And I would use the example of Waterloo. There are other places too. This is one of the most dynamic, innovative places in North America. It's a hugely desirable place to live. And we, for almost since the inception of two-tier government here, regional government, we have recognized that and have decided that we are going to continue to provide a place for people to live and work, and at the same time protect the farmland that surrounds three great dynamic cities. That can be done everywhere. And I would go so far as to say, instead of Bill 23, utilize Waterloo Region's official plan and spread it across the province. We have been able to both provide homes and protect agriculture at the same time and build a livable, complete city that is the envy of the world. Other places can do the same. You just need to do it right.
Yeah, you've almost anticipated my next question that in some respects, the opening the Greenbelt lands for development combined with Bill 23, which is literally being debated or having committee hearings right now, being debated at the legislature as we speak. The two combined seem to be a twin threat to good planning and to the preservation of agricultural lands. And I guess from the perspective of a farmer, how do you feel those are going to impact your life and the life of other farmers?
Here in Waterloo anyway, and I think other places in Ontario certainly also, we rural Ontarians and farmers have realized that what goes on in cities has an impact on us. In other words, good planning in urban areas affects our ability to grow food and to protect our farmland. And we have long been advocates of intensification and greater densities. And the way you do that is by building complete, livable communities. In other words, places where people want to live and work. Some of the parts of Bill 23 go counter to that. The fact that parkland dedication rates are significantly reduced, as a matter of fact, they're halved. One of the things that you have to provide in a denser living environment is green space. You have to provide that. That's what gives people life. And when you take that away, you make more dense cities a less livable place. And that's wrong. And I'll go further and say that the cap on development charges and the elimination of development charges in some cases preclude cities from doing good planning and providing infrastructure that's necessary for growth and new housing. And if the principle of new growth not paying for new growth is instituted, all the rest of us are subsidizing new housing. And I fear that property taxes are going to increase significantly in order to pay for that new building. And that should not be the way new building is done. It just goes counter to all good planning practices. And it will inevitably lead to higher taxes, more farmland loss, and in all likelihood, higher housing costs.
Yeah, no, it's definitely more expensive to service sprawl development than gentle density or missing middle development for sure.
Absolutely.
One of the things I think a lot of folks, this question is directed to our audience who probably wouldn't live in rural Ontario, maybe want to know what it's like to be a farmer. But I'm just thinking from the work I did on the GTA Agricultural Action Committee back in my pre-politician days. One of the challenges as you have urban encroachment on farmland is just competing uses of roads, of just like equipment. Can you maybe just talk a little bit about the challenges that farmers that particularly live near more urban areas face as you start seeing this sprawl development encroach into agricultural areas?
I would characterize it this way. Agriculture is a system. It's not only one farm, one piece of property. It's lots and lots of pieces of property where people are doing basically the same thing, and that's growing food. Without the encumbrance of scattered rural development and urban encroachment, which makes it significantly more difficult for us to do what we do. That's why places with good planning ensure that there aren't severances everywhere and scattered rural development. Yes, there are lots of people who can live together quite agreeably with agriculture. There are others who find it difficult, primarily people moving out from the city who aren't used to the smells and the sounds and the lights of agriculture and the things that normally happen on a farm. And you mentioned busy roads. We drive big machinery, and my fellow farmers north of Waterloo utilize horses. It is difficult to share the road, especially if that road is busy, in a safe manner with people who are commuting. It is really tough, and it inevitably leads to tragedy.
Yeah, no, I think it's an important consideration that people don't oftentimes realize until they're in those situations. I want to shift gears a little bit and just talk about the important contribution farming makes to Ontario's economy and what happens or what will happen if we continue to lose farmland at the unsustainable rate that we're losing it at right now.
Like I said before, this is a special place. We produce food, we produce it abundantly, and we produce products that can't be grown anywhere else. I would hate to see that disappear. Agriculture and food is the largest business in this province. We're again the number 3 food hub in North America. Most people don't know that. They take it for granted. One interesting thing that happened at the beginning of COVID is shelves actually went bare. And when people went to the grocery store, there was nothing on the shelves. Granted, that didn't last for very long, but it goes to show what could happen in the future. We still import a significant amount of a food that we use from the US. That has to cross a border. That border can become very thick, very fast. Would it not be better as a province and a country to be able to be self-sufficient in food production? A country that can't feed itself is a country that's in peril.
Yeah, I hear you. I oftentimes say that a country that can't feed itself is just as vulnerable as a country that can't defend itself, or even more vulnerable, probably. I wanted to ask, so whenever something like the Greenbelt that is supposed to be permanently protected, you start opening it up, in this case, 7,400 acres, oftentimes that leads to a rush of land speculation in and around those parcels, with the hope that more land will get opened up for development and those land speculators can cash in. Can you talk a bit about like how that affects farming, kind of that cycle of land speculation and just what it means for succession planning, or, you know, younger people being able to go into agriculture, et cetera?
I'll speak about it from the perspective of permanence and how farmers, like all business people, make decisions. If I am sure that my land will remain farmland for the foreseeable future and possibly for my children's future, I am far more likely to invest in that land. I am more likely to take care of that land. I'm more likely to build buildings. I'm more likely to grow my business. If there's any chance that that land will become urbanized at some point in the future, I'm not going to invest in it. It just doesn't make sense. So the ability to speculate and that land at some point changing to another class, principally urban, has a deadening effect on agriculture. That's why good planning can be a tool that we use to ensure that there is some permanence in land use. And some cities, I'll use Waterloo as an example again, which has a hard countryside line, have basically promised rural Waterloo that we will not cross that line. And so you see something unique here, and that is investment in farmland and farms by farmers right up against the countryside line, because they're pretty well assured that it's going to be farmland, hopefully forever. You don't see that in other places where there's no permanence. And there's no assurance that that land isn't going to change at some point in the future. And unfortunately, when we don't take care of our soils, they degrade. And that is the loss of an incredibly valuable resource. You know, farmland is a non-renewable natural resource. When you cover it with concrete, it's gone forever. On the other hand, if you look after the soil and you look after the land, it's something that can last forever. For goodness sakes, here in Southern Ontario, Indigenous peoples have grown corn and squash and beans for thousands of years on the same land. If you look after it, it can last forever.
And when that, I guess, trust is broken, or that permanency, the promise of permanency is broken, what happens to those investments along that countryside line?
Well, it's almost like it's land in waiting for something else. And I'm not going to say it's dead. It's not dead in the sense that it still can't grow things. It's dead in the sense that it's not being invested in and managed in the best way it could be. And that is obviously not the same as having it paved over, but it's certainly not the same as something that is stewarded and looked after the way it should be. I'll say one thing about farmland as a natural resource. It's something that should be treasured. It's something that supports a province and a country. And you can't make farmland. You can't do that. If you don't save it, it's gone forever. There are lots of places to build houses, and there are lots of ways to build houses within urban envelopes that don't involve the loss of farmland. And we need to do that. And there are examples of it being done. Just we need to do more.
So Mark, we're coming up to the end of our time together. I know you're incredibly busy right now, so I don't want to take up too much of your time today. But I was going to say, if you had an opportunity to speak to the Premier, what would you say? But maybe I'll put it this way: if you had an opportunity to speak to an MPP, what would you tell that MPP, and what would you want that MPP to be saying in the legislature right now about opening the Greenbelt for development in particular, and protecting farmland in general?
Well, if that MPP was not from Waterloo, I would say, come and visit. Here's an example of a place that does it right. This place is known all over the world as a place of innovation. It is also the best farmland in Ontario. It has the second highest income per acre and the second highest income per farm in any county in Ontario. So we have incredible agriculture and incredible people living in the urban envelope. That's because of good planning. That's because of two-tier government. That's because of people who care about the place that they live. That's about people who recognize that there is a countryside line And when you cross that line from urban to rural, you are in farmland. And that is a place where your food is grown and produced. And there is a recognition of that. There's an appreciation of that. And it would be wonderful if other municipalities were able to plan in the same way that we've been able to. And that is not impossible. That is certainly possible. And it would be wonderful if Bill 23 did that instead of what it does.
Yeah, and to put that into perspective, Kitchener Waterloo is two of the fastest growing cities in Ontario, accommodating growth, accommodating new residents, accommodating population increases, while at the same time, the region of Waterloo is protecting all that great farmland that surrounds KW.
Yep, I can't say more. I'm proud of the place that I live in. I'm proud of the planning that's done here. Farmers in Waterloo recognized that a long time ago, more than 30 years ago, that it was important for us to be involved in urban planning. I'll simply mention that another tool that helps intensification and increased densities is good public transit. And we've been able to build an LRT, which is unique in that it is one of the smallest municipalities in North America that actually has good public transit like that. That's a tool that's used to increase densities. That's a tool that makes living in that place better. And the carrot is almost always better than the stick, but sometimes it's good to use both. Different people want to live in different places. Yes, there are people who want to live in single family homes, and let's not assume that everybody does, because the truth is they don't. Certain demographics like to live in higher densities. Some demographics like to live in medium densities. And there are certainly people who want to live high in the air. You need to provide, we need to provide, the government needs to provide, municipalities need to provide real choice in housing. And people will actually choose to live in higher density areas as long as they are complete and livable communities with all the amenities. And they will enjoy that. I will simply state that some of the higher density buildings, well, if not all of them, that are being built in Kitchener, Waterloo, and Cambridge are fully subscribed before a shovel goes in the ground. That should indicate to everyone that there is a desire and a choice by at least some people to live in higher density areas. And I will add more and say that in this day and age, when things are more and more expensive, the only truly affordable place to live are places where there is higher density and we can put more people per hectare.
Yeah, absolutely. So my final question for you is, for anybody who's and everyone who's tuning in today, I'm assuming they're probably as angry as the two of us were when we learned that the Greenbelt was going to be opened up for development, and probably share the concerns that we have about Bill 23. So what would you say to them in terms of recommendations to speak out around the importance of protecting farmland and protecting the Greenbelt?
Well, I'd say one thing about today's society, and that we don't have the same appreciation of institutions that we have had in the past. One of those being provincial government. And one of the reasons for that is legislation like Bill 23. When a promise is made by an institution or a government, it needs to be kept, or there better be a darn good reason for not keeping it. And I think it breeds contempt for institutions and government when they don't do what they say they're going to do. They don't keep their promises. And I think that's bad for society. It really is. That goes above agriculture, that goes beyond agriculture. That encompasses everybody everywhere. Food is important. Food production is important. And it doesn't just protect itself. You need to actively ensure that it can flourish and prosper so that everyone can have a choice in what they eat and where they get it.
Yeah, well said. Well, Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. I think hearing your voice and having the perspective of not only you as a farmer, but also you as a farmer who has played such an important role in regional planning in Waterloo region. I think just such a valuable contribution to the conversation. And so thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and lending your voice and your perspective on this issue.
And thank you very much, Mike, for appreciating agriculture and where your food comes from.
Yeah, well, if you've eaten today, thank a farmer.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. And by all means, stay in touch with the Ontario Green Party. Visit gpo.ca and learn about the actions that you can help us take to protect farmland and the Greenbelt in Ontario. Have a good day, everyone.
Was that okay, Mike?
You're great.
Okay. I hope that was helpful. I hope it meant something.
No, Mark, it's so important to have the voice of farmers. And it's I just really appreciate